Okay, this lesson is about Sydney's changing land use, and our goal today is to learn how Sydney's land use has changed. So I want you to be able to explain what land use is and how Sydney's land use has changed and what it might be in the future. So let's have a look at land use. Well, it's quite straightforward and easy. It's how the land is used, but for every site there is a function. Now the site will obviously change from a small a few dwellings over time to a big city, and that's what's happened in the past. So every settlement has a function. Some functions change, so a settlement might have just one to start off with and then change its function, or it might turn into multiple functions. So a good example is London. London, first of all, was, started off as a few dwellings. More people settled there because of its location on the river, because of it's a good source of food, water, and over time more people came because it's not becoming a market town, trading post. Then the Romans made a capital and then had government offices. So its function changed from source of food, source of water, to a meeting place, market town, government place. So that's what we mean by function. So we're going to look at obviously Sydney's function and start looking at how it's changed. So pre-1788, what was Sydney's function? Well, for the Aboriginal people who lived there, it was a source of food, it was a source of shelter. Although we don't have that history, we don't exactly know. That's what we think it would have been pre-1788. Definitely a source of food, source of shelter, source of water as well. After 1788, obviously Sydney's main function was a convict colony. Obviously convicts sent over in the first, second, third fleets, and Sydney started off as a convict colony where people were sent to. Free settlers started coming over, and that's why in 1840 we see it become a city. Now it's an important date because it changes its function. If it becomes a city, we're getting more use of the harbour. We're not using the harbour just for a source of fishing, we're using it for trade. And as a result, the council got more money and they started building new developments like the Queen Victoria building, government offices, New South Wales Parliament House. All of those buildings were built because of its changing land use and function. So Sydney becomes a very important city, not just in Australia but around the world because of its trade links and so on, and therefore its function changes. Then we look at modern day Sydney. Sydney has many functions. It's a tourist destination. It's the centre of business in Australia. It's a centre of trade. It's a centre of technological innovations. It's a centre of university learning, culture. So Sydney's modern function has changed dramatically from where it was in 1788. Now, when a city does change its function, it needs to change its land use, otherwise it can't change. So for Sydney to become what it is now, land use has had to change. So residential land has changed. We know now that not many people live in the CBD than they did in the 1800s. Why is that? Because people wanted bigger houses and people have moved out to the suburbs. That's why Sydney has increased in size. Also the types of housing. Remember when we went to the Rocks, the housing is terraced. It used to be terraced, but now people want single level houses, land and so on. So why is residential land and where's it changed? Well, people have started moving in the suburbs and the types of houses have changed. Commercial land, now when we talk about commercial land, we're talking about shops, cafes, bars, that type of thing. So how's that changed? Well, in that previous slide when I've showed you about the Queen Victoria building, that's a department store. So a department store is one store with different sections of menswear, women's wear, homeware, that type of thing. That type of shop has actually decreased. As a result, more people want specialist shops in one place. That's what an out-of-town shopping centre is. So places like Tuggerah, Westfield, Tuggerah, Hornsby have all moved to suburbia because there's bigger land, so they can have bigger shops, and because people obviously have got cars, they need car parking spaces. That couldn't happen in the CBD of Sydney. So as a result, we've seen more shops move out. Industrial land has also moved because of Sydney's changing land use. It's not an industrial centre now, it's more technological, it's trading in terms of economics, it's a centre of learning with universities. That industrial where it isn't needed anymore. As a result, we've seen urban decline, urban renewal, and that industry has then moved out. So shipping is now done at Botany Bay. It's a big container place, and if you look at Newcastle, it's a centre for coal loading. So residentially, commercially, and industrial land use has changed dramatically since 1788. So that's how Sydney has changed its land use and its commercial, residential, industrial development. Thanks.